Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Louis Taylor. This is an interesting video. I originally wanted to do a complete sort of whistle stop tour of the Polygogo oscillator, but I started having a fiddle around with it to sort of prepare myself for the video, and what I ended up coming up with was something completely different to what I intended to show in the video. And that is basically testament to why I'm making the video in the first place, because of this thing's capability. If you listen carefully, I've basically created synthesized rain sounds. And this probably isn't revolutionary, people probably do this all the time. I just thought it was a really interesting sound, and you can manipulate it to suit the certain way that you want it to sound. You know, if you want it to sound heavier, you just So the great thing about this module is that it basically has a lot of control over the parameters. They're all attenuable, if that's a word. Basically, you can attenuate all of them. You can control to what extent they are attenuated with these attenuverters up here. And they're also, when they're not being controlled, when they're not controlling the attenuation of something, the modulation, say, they work as a fine-tuning. So if I just bring this back down to so that's fine-tuning the pitch at the moment. So, for example, with this synthetic rain sound, let's just show you something here. Let's just close the window on this. Now, what's happening there is we've got the rain sound and we've got a filter here. And this is the carbon filter by WMD. It's a really nice, basic, but also surprisingly not so basic filter. Really nice quality, very nice form factor. You know, it doesn't take up much room in the case. I've got a little filter bank here, 3 filters. They're all very different. This one is the 2 HP filter. It's probably the most basic filter you could possibly think of. Just 3 modes: band pass, high pass, low pass. You can change the resolution, you can change the filter, and you can input sound. That's it. The Violruna by Noise Engineering is a much more complex filter, and it acts as a distortion unit as well, and there's a lot you can do with that. But the carbon is slightly more simple, than the Violruna, but has a lot more function than this. So it has its own fold, it has a saturation, you can do a 4-pole, which is really cool. You can actually modulate the resolutions, sorry, not the resolutions, the resonances pitch with volt per octave pitch modulation. You can attenuate the FM, you can ping it. It's really great. You can do loads of stuff. You can attenuate, you can modulate the saturation. Anyway, this is not meant to be about the carbon filter, but it's a great little piece in this rig. And I use it probably more often than any other filter in this, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm looking for another one at the moment. Anyway, moving on, back to this beast. What we've got going on here, I'll just briefly explain this, is we've got a pretty low pitch, really. That's high pitch, low pitch. As you can see, that's because the oscillations are so low that you can actually that's, you can actually hear each individual one. Is one oscillation that makes up that sound. The higher pitch I go, the faster the oscillations become, and the more distinguishable the pitch becomes, and the higher the pitch becomes. So that's that. Anyway, except for that, we have what is seemingly what makes up the sound, the fundamental part of it. So if I turn all of this down, turn the fold off, get rid of the cycle. Now, what we're left with there we go. Bit calmer there, but basically it's just a very nice, smooth, gradual spectrum between almost a triangle wave and a sine wave, basically. But this is almost, it's even further than a triangle wave. It's like just almost just like a line. It's kind of just, but there's enough movement there for a pitch to be heard. So it's probably a bit more like a square or something, but you got a square there. So I don't really know what's going on with that. But basically that's, you can kind of visually see here the different levels of oscillation that are added to the sound. That also changes the harmonics, which is basically what builds up the sound anyway. So it's not a true sine wave, it's just close enough. The reason why it's not a true one is because there are clearly harmonics. The great thing is that you can add even more with this, and that's a huge part of this module, which is really, really nice. So we'll get into that in a minute. So, moving on, we have this. Now, it's a little bit hard to tell what it is when you don't have any sort of added waves, but just get a nice wave here. It's moving a little bit. So it essentially separates. Now, I don't know necessarily the technical terms behind this, because I haven't really bothered to study the manual, but essentially what it does is that it just adds complexity to the sound wave. As you can see, it's just adding more and more layers harmonically as well, and it's just it's just another element of control over the sound there, which is really nice as well. Now, back to the beginning. We've got this thing here called roll. Oh, and by the way, this is actually called teeth. It says there, teeth. And that is essentially, yeah, it's just adding teeth to the sound wave, adding lots of different complexities. Now, roll is quite literally roll. It spins in a sort of three-dimensional way, almost. It sort of oscillates the oscillations. So if you picture a sound wave going along, it's kind of just spinning the entire thing, disrupting everything, which is amazing and a really, really useful feature as well. To add to that, we have cycle, which is essentially the same thing, but it basically just means you can hyper-roll. And it just means that the harmonics become more apparent and more at the forefront of the sound, prominent I suppose, than the actual fundamental. So that's what it's doing there, which is really interesting because there's a lot of uses for that, which are more to do with sound design than music. But a lot of music is sound design these days, and especially when it comes to percussion or more sort of textual sounds within music, it's an infinitely useful parameter. So let's just turn that down. Turn the cycle off too. Now these two are harmonic controls. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know what this ratio thing does, but I'll just show you what it sounds like. Doesn't really sound like anything. But what it does do is it drastically affects what this sounds like, which is the actual, how many harmonics you're adding. So that's basically just adding loads and loads of harmonics up the series. But this is 1-to-1, so I think that's basically like the natural harmonic series of that note. So basically, I think what it's doing is that at this level, you have the harmonic at the start of the sound. Sorry, the fundamental at the start of the sound, and then on top of that, the harmonics are added, right, on top of it. That's the crucial part there. They go higher pitch. Now, if I wanted to do it so that it kept going in that direction, it just becomes really high pitched. But if I wanted the harmonics to be added beneath the fundamental, that's what that does. Which creates some awesome harmonies. And because of the dissonances that are being created with the upper harmonics, due to the harmonics being added beneath the fundamental note, it creates a really, really rich and sort of grungy, dirty texture, which I love. So putting it back to the beginning. Now, we have a couple of other functions here, and then I'll move on to how I got to the rain sound. Cycle we've been through. Regular, essentially just puts it into a regular mode. OP ratio. This is an interesting one. So I can't remember what OP stands for, but it kind of has something to do with the way that the X and Y outputs, which is left and right. Well, actually, I think the reason why it's called left and X and Y is because it's actually more like X and Y. It's up and down, up and across rather, as opposed to left and right. So they really are trying to go with something that's a little bit more dimensional here than just stereo, which is really nice. But you won't necessarily be able to hear it right now because I've got it plugged into a filter. Yeah, let me just change that so you can get a feel for that. Okay, so let's just take this. We'll put these into the output for now so you can get a little feel for it. Okay, now. So what happens is it started moving. It's like, well, I don't have cycle on, but if that's regular mode where they're just going bananas in the stereo field, OP ratio just changes this ever so slightly. It changes the sort of stereo image of the ratio harmonics. So that's going that way around. That's still, and that's crazy. So you can have it moving, static, or bananas, basically, which is just off. I really like this mode because it adds such a nice amount of width to the sound, which is really nice. But for now, for the sake of this video, which I will come back to this, I'm going to put it back into the filter, and I'm going to show you a bit more about this sound I came up with the rain. Okay, so what we've got here is these harmonics. I'm going to push them all the way up. Okay, so we've got these really high pitched sounds here. Now I'm going to put a cycle on. So more rapid motion. Roll, you're going all the way up too. Okay, we're a little bit far off range so far, but we're getting closer. Moving forward. Adding teeth, but when there's not much to add to, it sounds very sparse. Okay, we're getting a little bit more noisy there. So a little bit closer to the rain sound. Okay, leave the pitch where it was. Now the key element of this, oh, and there's also, I forgot to mention by the way, you have FM here, which you can change with a modulation source, which just wobbles the hell out of it. You can sync it with something else, so if I plug a sync into another oscillator, I can actually get the sound from that. Oh, not long enough, that one. But essentially, if I wanted to sync it with this oscillator up here, I just sync it. There's a sync output there. So it has an effect. Anyway, moving on from that. The key element of this is this LFO triggering ever so slightly the pitch. And there we have it. We're basically there now. Bit of reverb. And move back to the rain. Now, I really like that, and basically what's happening here is that I'm ever so slightly modulating. Actually, no, that's not what's happening. What's happening is I'm modulating the hell out of this pitch control, and it's going all over the place because this is essentially a really high, fast frequency rate now because I've turned the rate all the way up, so it's no longer really a low frequency oscillator, but because it still is a low frequency in the grand scheme of things, it modulates things in a way which isn't actually audible as a pitch. It's still a fast vibrational thing rather than a pitch-based thing, so that's what creates this sound. Now this is obviously still sounding a little bit digital. This is fold, and it basically, you can see a visual representation of it here. It just expands the sound and distorts it. It folds it on itself. So that helps with the noise. So there we go, back to the rain sound, which is really nice. Now, the other thing that I was showing earlier was this filter. Basically, if you don't know, and I'm sure a lot of you already do know this, if you don't know, the filter is essentially what a window does anyway. When you shut the window, or a door in a club or wherever you are, it's essentially just blocking out the high frequencies, which basically exclusively travel through the airwaves. Whereas low frequencies have a lot more rumble, vibrational qualities, and they can travel through solid objects a lot easier because they have a lot more power in their vibrational quality. So when you shut a window, you're shutting those high frequencies out. So if I just shut the window, it sounds like that when it's outside. If I had a really good noise cancellation window, or if I put my fingers over my ears, might start to sound a little bit like this. It's a very relaxing sound. Suddenly I'm going to open the window. It's a really simple piece of sound design. And now, this wouldn't necessarily fit in a more organic acoustic sound effect palette, but in something like, I don't know, a film like Blade Runner, where it's a very digitalized setting, or a show which is like a cartoon or something like that, and it's set in a digital world like Tron or something like that, would be a really interesting example. I think in those sorts of more digital-based films, you can actually get a lot of use out of sound effects like this. Because, for example, in Tron, everything's very the whole world is essentially a computer. You're inside a computer. And if there was rain, it would be bouncing off all of the computerized objects, and sound would be not dissimilar to this, I imagine. So I think that it's kind of a digitalized, synthesized, synthetic rain sound, and I really like it. But that's not all we can do. And one thing that I really enjoyed doing with this recently was putting this into a sci-fi apocalyptic type modular patch which I came up with. And the first thing that I based it off was this module. So to show you a little bit about that, I'm going to take it out of the filter. I'm going to plug these outputs in stereo now. And this is where we come back. So that's nice. Now we have the rain in the stereo field, so I'm just going to let you listen to that for a minute. Almost ASMR to my ears, but maybe one day I can start an ASMR channel or something, modular synthesizer ASMR for all you music nerds. But basically, let's move on to the sound that I was trying to create in this patch. It's going to be hard to recreate from scratch, but let's give it a go. Okay, I'm going to get rid of all this crap. Just the outputs for now. So, very heavy left dominated sound right now. For some reason. Oh wow, yeah. Listen to the depth of that sound, it's so good. Anyway, just a bit of fun there, a bit of taster for the sound. Obviously you can get a lot out of this already, but I almost don't want to move it. So what we had was some sort of rumbling, changing sound. Anyway, this might not sound like much right now, but what we're going to try and do is alter this rhythmically a little bit. I'm going to try and attenuate this. Bit too slow. Here we go, we're getting there now. Bit too much there, but a bit too slow, I think. Okay. Here we are. Okay, we're there now. So obviously this is a really kind of interesting sound design feature, but it featured heavily in a track that I wrote and performed recently on YouTube, which I'll link, but kind of sounded a bit like this. I wonder if I can just give you a little preview of something similar. Wrong thing. That thing. Okay. We're getting there. Anyway, you get the idea. Maybe you don't. If you don't, check out the video, because that was not the best performance of that. But the idea is that this is the fundamental source of that track, and then you add layers, you add more and more layers to it basically. So I had percussion going, melody, bass line. I was even pinging the filter to get a really kind of cool sound. But that's kind of the idea with this. You can use it for basically anything. It's amazing. So we've got this cool sound, we had the rain earlier, both very different. And then simply, if you wanted something a little bit more musical in itself, it's easy to get there. So I'm just going to add a little, I don't know what this is going to sound like, but I'm just going to add a little melody from the sequencer here. So that's basically the idea of this. There's a lot you can do with it. You can make it melodic, you can make it bassy. You can do anything. You can make sound design, you can make epic textures, you can make cinematic sounds, melodies, bass lines. I'm sure there's a way you could do harmonies with it if you really thought about it. You can do anything with it. It's fantastic. Go and check out this module. It was one of the best purchases I've made ever, and it fits into basically any system perfectly because it's so versatile. So I really recommend it. Just a complete disclaimer, I'm not affiliated at all with these people who make this. I just really love it. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm just going to jam for a minute. You'll feel free to stay and enjoy it. If not, thanks so much for getting to this point in the video. Please feel free to like, subscribe, comment and share. Especially subscribe and like. Really would appreciate it. And I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now.